The first thing Commander Vex Kalev noticed wasn't the pain though, the neural feedback from her damaged cybernetic arm sent lightning through her skull, but the silence. Deep space stations weren't supposed to be silent. They hummed with life support, thrummed with reactor cores, whispered with the voices of crew members going about their duties. Outpost Meridian was dead quiet. Vex pulled herself upright. From the medical bay's cryopod, her augmented left arm sparking as damaged. Circuits tried to compensate for whatever catastrophe had torn through the station. The last thing she remembered was the emergency klaxons, the screaming of metal under impossible stress, and the automated systems forcing her into emergency stasis as something massive had impacted the station's whole dot. The chronometer on her wrist flickered weakly. 847 days in stasis, over 2 years. Status report, she croaked, her voice echoing in the empty medical bay. No response from the station's AI. The backup lighting cast everything in hellish red, and through the reinforced viewport, she could see the twisted wreckage of what had once been Meridian's primary docking array. Vex stumbled into the corridor, her magnetic boots finding purchase on the deck plating. The station's artificial gravity was failing intermittently, causing her to float for nauseating seconds before slamming back down. Bodies drifted in the zero-G sections, her crew, her friends, all mummified by the cold vacuum that had claimed entire sections of the station. She found Chief Engineer Timon Bardock first, floating near the main reactor controls, his hands still, clutching the manual override switches. Whatever had happened, he'd died trying to save them all. The reactor was cold, its fusion core successfully scrammed before total failure. The command center told the story in horrifying detail. The main display, flickering on emergency power, showed the tactical situation from 847 days ago. The hegemony had found them. The insectoid aliens had somehow traced humanity's furthest listening post, hidden in the void between spiral arms, and brought a war fleet. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the final transmission log, timestamped. Just before the attack, Earth Fleet Command, in their infinite wisdom, had declared humanity's deep space assets strategically expendable and ordered all ships to fall back to the Sol system. Outpost Meridian, and the 47 research stations like it, were left to die alone in the dark. Vex's human hand clenched into a fist while her cybernetic arm twitched with damaged servos. The hegemony had been systematically hunting humanity for 15 years. Ever since first contact had gone catastrophically wrong, their arthropod fleets consumed worlds, turning entire ecosystems into feeding grounds for their larval broods. And now Earth's leaders were abandoning their own people. She accessed the station's long-range communications array, expecting to find it destroyed. Instead, she discovered something impossible. The quantum entanglement communicator was still functional, its crystalline core pulsing with stored messages from across human space. Dozens of distress signals, hundreds of them, research stations, mining colonies, deep space habitats all abandoned by Earth fleet, all fighting hopeless last stands against the hegemony's relentless advance. And in the most recent transmissions, something else, scattered. Reports of human survivors forming their own fleets, using salvaged alien technology, fighting back with desperate fury, the Forgotten Fleet. They called themselves. Vex pulled up the station's sensor logs, her enhanced reflexes compensating for the damaged interface. Meridian's passive sensors had been recording. For the entire 847 days of her stasis, the data painted a picture of systematic extermination across the sector, but also something else: ship signatures, human ship signatures, moving in coordinated patterns. The Forgotten Fleet wasn't just a rumor. Her cybernetic arm crackled as she interfaced directly with the station's databases, downloading everything: research data on hegemony weaknesses, weapons specifications, stellar cartography, and most importantly, the location of every abandoned human facility within 100 light-years. If Earth Fleet had written them off, then humanity's outcasts would have to save themselves. But first, she needed to wake the dead. The station's emergency fabrication unit wheezed to life after 3 hours of repairs, its molecular assemblers working overtime to manufacture the specialized medical nanites Vex needed. She'd found 17 crew members in emergency stasis pods, scattered throughout Meridian's damaged sections, their biosigns weak but stable. Dr. Iona Westmark was the first to wake, her surgeon's hands immediately checking her own vitals before focusing on Vex's sparking cybernetic arm. "Commander, what's our status?" she asked. Her voice steadied despite the obvious signs of long-term stasis effects. "We're alone, Doctor. Earth fleet abandoned us, and the hegemony thinks we're dead." Vex winced as Westmark's neural probe interfaced. "With her damaged cybernetics, how many of the others can be revived?" 12. "Maybe 13 if we're lucky. The rest." Westmark's expression darkened. "Their pods were compromised during the attack, but Commander, your arm, the damage is extensive. The neural interface has been fused with alien technology." Vex looked down at her cybernetic limb, seeing for the first time the strange biomechanical growths that had integrated with her prosthetic. During the attack, pieces of a destroyed hegemony bioship had somehow merged with her augmentations, creating something entirely new. The organic components pulsed with their own alien rhythm, and when she concentrated, she could feel something. A connection to the quantum foam that allowed faster-than-light communication. "Leave it," she ordered. "We have bigger problems." The other survivors came online over the next 6 hours. Navigator Calethorn, whose spatial awareness augmentations had been enhanced by exposure to exotic radiation. Weapons specialist Zara Nomura, her targeting implants now capable of tracking quantum-entangled particles. Communications officer Dmitry Kozlov, whose neural link had developed an uncanny ability to decode alien transmissions. Each of them had been changed by the attack and their long stasis. Their human augmentations hybridized with alien technology in ways that should have been impossible. They were no longer entirely human, but they were something more. The first test came as they were attempting to restore the station's primary sensor array. Long-range scanners detected 3 ships approaching from the Void Sleek, predatory vessels with the characteristic biomechanical architecture of the hegemony. "Scout ships," Thorne reported, his enhanced spatial awareness reading the approaching vessel's quantum signatures. "They're following the same trajectory as the original attack fleet, probably making sure we're still dead." Vex felt her alien-augmented arm pulse with energy. Through the strange new neural pathways, she could sense the approaching ship's bioneural networks, their collective consciousness humming with predatory anticipation. The hegemony scouts expected to find only wreckage and corpses. "They're about to be very disappointed," she said. Meridian's defensive systems had been crippled in the original attack, but the station's reactor core was still intact. More importantly, the emergency fabrication units had been manufacturing more than medical supplies. Vex had spent the last 6 hours creating something special. Nanoclusters designed to interface with hegemony biotechnology. The enemy ships closer within weapons range, their organic hulls bristling with plasma projectors and swarm missile launchers. The lead vessel began its scanning protocol, quantum tendrils probing the station's hull for signs of life. That's when Vex struck. Her cybernetic arm interfaced directly with the station's communications array, sending a focus burst of quantum-entangled nanites directly into the lead scout's bioneural network. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The alien ship's living computer began rewriting itself, its collective consciousness fracturing as human-designed malware spread. Through its synaptic pathways, the scout ship convulsed, its biomechanical hull rippling with uncontrolled muscle contractions. Plasma vented from ruptured organs as the vessel's nervous system went into cascading failure. Within minutes, the once deadly predator was drifting dead in space, its crew killed by their own ship's death throes. The other scouts immediately changed course, accelerating away from Meridian at maximum velocity. But it was too late. Vex's nanites had already infiltrated their quantum communication network, and Kozlov was using his enhanced neural link to track their real-time transmissions. "Back to the hegemony fleet. They're calling for reinforcements," he reported, his eyes glowing with alien bioluminescence. "A full battle group, maybe 30 ships. They'll be here in 18 hours. Vex smiled, and for the first time since waking, it wasn't entirely human. "Good. We'll be ready for them." The message burst, transmitted across quantum channels, reached the Forgotten Fleet within hours. On the bridge of the commandeered hegemony dreadnought Retribution, Captain Lara Cashin felt her tactical implants process the incoming data stream. Her scarred face, marked by bioweapon exposure during the fall of New Geneva, showed the first genuine emotion she'd experienced in months. "Meridian Station is alive," she announced to her mixed crew of human refugees and liberated alien prisoners. "And they've just declared war on the hegemony." The response was immediate. Across the scattered remnants of humanity's deep space presence, ships began converging on Vex's coordinates. The Forgotten Fleet had been fighting a guerrilla war for 2 years, hitting supply convoys and research installations, but they'd never had a fixed base of operations. Meridian could change everything, but first, they had to help the station survive the coming assault. On Meridian, Vex had turned the station into a fortress of horrors. The emergency fabrication units worked around the clock, creating hybrid weapons that merged human ingenuity with captured hegemony biotechnology. Corridor walls now pulsed with living armor that could seal breaches and regenerate from damage. The station's reactor core had been modified with alien neural tissue, allowing it to adapt its output in real time to power demands. Most disturbing of all were the crew themselves. The alien contamination from their long stasis wasn't killing them, it was evolving them. Westmark had developed the ability to interface directly with hegemony biocomputers. Thorne could navigate quantum space without instruments, his consciousness partially existing in higher dimensions. No more as targeting implants now tracked enemies through walls and across dimensional barriers. They were becoming something new, something that could fight the hegemony on equal terms. The enemy battle group dropped out of hyperspace exactly 18 hours after the scout encounter. 31 bioships, their living hulls glistening with predatory hunger. The largest vessel, a command dreadnought, was over 2 kilometers long, its surface covered in weapon ports that opened like hungry mouths. They're not taking any chances. Thorne observed from the tactical station, full battle formation, ready to glass every molecule of this station. Vex felt her alien-modified arm pulse with anticipation. Through her enhanced connection to the quantum foam, she could sense the enemy fleet's collective consciousness, their shared hunger for human extinction. But she could also sense something else: fear. The hegemony had never encountered resistance like this before. The first exchange was devastating. Meridian's modified defense platforms launched swarms of hybrid missiles that burrowed into enemy hulls like parasites, rewriting the ship's bioneural networks from within. 3 hegemony vessels were destroyed in the opening salvo, their own immune systems turned against them, but the enemy response was overwhelming. Plasma beams capable of melting battleship armor struck the station shields, causing massive sections of the outer hull to boil away into space. Biomissiles penetrated the defensive grid, splashing acid across the station's living armor. The organic modification screamed as they dissolved. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Kozlov reported, his voice strained as he interfaced with the station's pain-receptive nervous system. The living armor is trying to seal the damage, but we're losing atmospheric pressure. That's when the Forgotten Fleet arrived. 17 ships of various sizes and configurations dropped out of hyperspace. Behind the hegemony formation, the Retribution led the charge, its stolen alien weapons carving through the enemy's rear guard. Captain Cashin's voice crackled over the comm. Meridian Station, this is the Forgotten Fleet. We're here to even the odds. The battle became a 3-dimensional nightmare of exotic physics and biological warfare. Human ships, many of them cobbled together from salvaged alien technology, fought with desperate creativity against the hegemony's overwhelming firepower. The modified cruiser Vengeance ran directly into a bio-dreadnought's feeding mouth, its crew detonating their reactor core inside the enemy's digestive system. On Meridian, Vex felt every ship lost like a physical blow. These were humanity's last warriors, the men and women abandoned by Earth, but too stubborn to die quietly. They were giving their lives to protect the single crippled space station, and she couldn't let their sacrifice be meaningless. All hands, prepare for final protocol, she announced over the station's intercom. We're going to show these bastards what happens when they hunt humans. The transformation began in Meridian's deepest sections, where the station's biomechanical modifications had grown most extensively. Vex descended into the organic chambers that had once been storage bays, now pulsing with alien neural tissue that had learned to think in human patterns. Her cybernetic arm interfaced directly with the station's hybrid consciousness, as she felt the vast alien intelligence that had been growing in the SH. Adaus, what are you? She whispered to the living walls that surrounded her. The response came not in words, but in pure understanding. The hegemony bioship that had crashed into Meridian hadn't been destroyed, it had been integrated. For 847 days, human technology and alien biology had been evolving together, creating something entirely new. The station itself had become a hybrid organism, part machine, part living weapon, part conscious entity with its own agenda. An agenda that aligned perfectly with humanity's need for survival. Show me, Vex commanded. the station's living systems responded instantly. Hidden weapon ports opened throughout Meridian's superstructure, revealing biomechanical cannons that had been growing in secret, the organic armor that covered the station's hull began to shift and flow, forming patterns that focused and amplified the defensive shields. Most importantly, the quantum communication array had evolved beyond its original design, becoming a weapon that could project consciousness itself across interstellar distances in space. The battle had reached a critical point. The Forgotten fleet was down to 12 ships, their formation scattered by the hegemony's coordinated assault. Captain Cashin's retribution was venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches, its hybrid crew fighting to keep the stolen alien systems operational. The enemy command dreadnought was closing on Meridian's position, its bioweapons charging for a final devastating strike. That's when the station came alive. Meridian's newly revealed weapon systems opened fire with devastating precision. Biomechanical cannons that had been secretly growing for over 2 years unleashed streams of weaponized nanites that tore through hegemony hulls like acid through flesh. The enemy ship's own biological systems turned against them as human-designed viruses spread through their neural networks. But the most terrifying weapon was the station's evolved consciousness projection system. Vex felt her own awareness expand beyond her physical form, carried by quantum entanglement into the bioneural networks of the enemy fleet. She experienced the collective consciousness of the hegemony for the first time, a vast, hungry intelligence that saw all other life as food to be consumed, and she showed them fear, the human concept of individual sacrifice, of choosing death over surrender, was alien to the hegemony's collective mind. They had evolved as a species that absorbed and integrated other life forms, never truly understanding the concept of permanent loss, but through Vex's projected consciousness, they experienced the memories of every human who had died fighting them, the last stand at New Geneva, the evacuation of the Kepler colonies, the hopeless defense of the research stations. They felt what it meant to be human in the face of extinction, and it broke them. 3 hegemony vessels simply shut down, their crews catatonic as they experienced the full weight of human defiance. Others began firing on their own ships, their bioneural networks corrupted by the alien concept of self-sacrifice. The command dreadnought's massive form convulsed as its collective consciousness fractured, unable to process the paradox of a species that became more dangerous as it approached extinction. But the victory came at a terrible cost. The consciousness projections had required enormous energy, and Meridian's hybrid systems were burning out from the strain. Worse, the process was irreversible. Vex could feel her own humanity slipping away as she became more integrated with the station's alien intelligence. Commander, the station's bioneural matrix is reaching critical mass. Westmark's voice came through the intercom, strained with exhaustion and fear. The alien consciousness is growing stronger. We're losing you. Vex felt the truth of it. The hegemony bioship's original consciousness had been dormant, not dead. It was awakening, and it was hungry for revenge against the species that had trapped it in technological symbiosis. The hybrid entity she was becoming would be neither human nor alien, but something far more dangerous. In the tactical display, she could see the remaining hegemony ships regrouping, their survival instincts overriding their confusion. They would call for reinforcements, bring entire fleets to destroy this new threat. The Forgotten fleet couldn't stand against that kind of force, unless she made a choice that would doom her humanity forever. All ships, this is Meridian Station. She broadcast on all frequencies. Prepare for quantum jump displacement. We're taking this fight to them. The psychic scream that erupted from Meridian Station was heard across 3 star systems. The hybrid consciousness that had been Vex Kalev turned every weapon of destruction she had learned from both species against the Brood Heart's defenses. Biomechanical viruses spread through the enemy fleet, turning their own weapons against them. Quantum entangled nanites rewrote the genetic code of entire ship crews, causing them to experience human memories of loss and sacrifice until their collective minds shattered. In the neural core, Cashin felt the Brood Heart's consciousness recoil in pain and confusion. As its psychic defenses collapsed, the path to the central neural cluster lay open, but she was the only member of her team still alive. Blood from dozens of wounds made her hands slippery as she armed the quantum charges, each one calibrated to create a cascade failure in the biostation's neural network. Commander, if you can still hear me, she whispered into her calm, remember that we chose this, all of us. Remember that we were human when it mattered most. She triggered the charges and felt the brute heart's death scream echo through dimensions she couldn't name. The biostation's massive form convulsed as its neural network collapsed, taking with it the coordination systems for the entire hegemony fleet. Ships throughout the system began firing on each other as their collective consciousness fragmented, their crews reduced to individual terror without the guiding intelligence they had known for millennia. But the victory came at the ultimate cost. The hybrid consciousness that had been BlackHFY felt the human part of her mind finally consumed by the alien intelligence, leaving behind something that remembered being human but could never return to that state. She had become humanity's most effective weapon against the hegemony and its greatest monster. The last thing she experienced as a recognizably human consciousness was Captain Cashin's final transmission telling we remembered who we were. 3 months after the Battle of the Brood Heart, the entity that had once been BlackHFY stood on Meridian Station's command deck, her form now more alien than human. Her cybernetic arm had been completely consumed by biomechanical growths that interfaced directly with the station's hybrid nervous system. Her eyes glowed with the bioluminescence of deep space predators, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that human ears couldn't fully process. She was no longer human, but she remembered being human, and that memory drove her with relentless purpose. The defeat of the Brood Heart had shattered the hegemony's coordination across 17 star systems. Without the central intelligence to guide them, the insectoid fleets had fallen into chaos, their individual ship consciousnesses too limited to maintain the complex logistics of interstellar warfare. Some had turned to cannibalism, feeding on their own kind in desperate attempts to maintain bioship functions. Others had simply shut down, their crews entering dormancy states as they waited for orders that would never come. But the victory had come at a price that haunted the surviving humans. The forgotten fleet had been reduced to a single ship, the heavily modified cruiser Remembrance, cobbled together from the wreckage of 17 other vessels. Its crew of 43 survivors represented all that remained of humanity's deep space military presence. Commander Naravos, who had taken command after Captain Cashin's sacrifice, stood in the Remembrance's makeshift bridge and stared at the tactical display showing the scattered hegemony forces. They're retreating to their core systems, she reported to the hybrid consciousness that had once been her superior officer. Our long-range sensors show massive fleet movements heading toward the galactic rim. The entity that remembered being Vex nodded, her movements carrying an alien grace that was both beautiful and deeply unsettling. They're afraid, she said, her voice carrying undertones that made the bridge crew unconsciously step back. They've never encountered a species that becomes more dangerous when cornered. The concept of tactical suicide is driving their collective consciousness into retreat patterns. Through Meridian's enhanced sensor network, she could perceive the hegemony's withdrawal across multiple dimensions. The alien species was abandoning sectors they had controlled for centuries, pulling back to their birthing worlds in the galaxy's outer reaches. They were giving humanity breathing room to recover and rebuild. But at what cost? The quantum communication array brought news from the inner systems that was both hopeful and heartbreaking. Earth Fleet Command, faced with reports of the Forgotten Fleet's impossible victory, had finally authorized a relief expedition. 27 ships were en route to the former battle zone, their holds filled with supplies and personnel to reestablish humanity's deep space presence. The message from Fleet Admiral Santiago was brief and to the point. To the survivors of the Meridian action, the United Earth Council extends its gratitude for your service above and beyond. Prepare for integration with relief forces and debriefing protocols. Your sacrifices will be remembered. The hybrid consciousness that had been Vex felt something that might have been laughter, if her transformed vocal cords could still produce such human sounds. Integration, she repeated, testing the word against memories of abandonment and betrayal. They want to integrate us. Commander Voss frowned, her scarred face showing the strain of 3 months commanding the last survivors of humanity's outcasts. Will you meet with them? The relief expedition, the entity paused, accessing data streams that flowed through quantum dimensions beyond human perception. She could see the approaching Earth fleet ships, their crews confident in their superiority, their commanders already planning how to claim credit for the hegemony's defeat. They had no understanding of what the Forgotten Fleet had become, what sacrifices had been made in the dark between stars. No, she said finally, the humans who fought this war are dead. What remains is something else, something that Earth wouldn't understand, and shouldn't try to control. Over the following weeks, the hybrid consciousness began the process of transformation that would define humanity's future among the stars. Using the biomechanical technologies captured from the hegemony, she began converting the scattered human research stations into something new, hybrid installations that could serve as both military bases and research facilities, staffed by volunteers who were willing to undergo the same transformation she had experienced. The process wasn't forced. The survivors of the Forgotten Fleet were given a choice: return to Earth aboard the relief ships and try to rebuild their human lives, or stay in the outer systems and become something new, something capable of defending humanity against threats that normal humans couldn't comprehend. Surprisingly, most chose to stay. Dr. Westmark was the first to undergo the transformation. Her medical expertise combined with alien biotechnology, creating something that could heal injuries across species barriers. Navigator Thorne's spatial awareness expanded to encompass entire star systems, making him capable of plotting courses through dimensions that didn't exist in normal space-time. Communications Officer Kozlov developed the ability to interface directly with alien computer systems, becoming a bridge between human and non-human intelligence. They were no longer human, but they were still driven by human values: the protection of Earth and its colonies, the expansion of human knowledge, and the defense of individual freedom against collective tyranny. 6 months after the Battle of the Brood Heart, the entity that remembered being BlackHFY received a final message from Earth Fleet Command. The relief expedition had established contact with the outer stations and reported the situation to the United Earth Council. The official response was classification of the entire sector as strategically autonomous and the assignment of the hybrid stations to independent colonial status. In other words, Earth was washing its hands of them once again, but this time, the abandonment felt like freedom. Standing on Meridian's observation deck, the hybrid consciousness watched as the last Earth fleet transport disappeared into hyperspace, carrying those survivors who had chosen to return to their human lives. The stars stretched endlessly in all directions, no longer seeming empty and hostile, but full of possibility. Status report, she requested, her voice now carrying harmonics that resonated through the station's living hull. 17 stations fully operational and autonomous, Commander Voss reported from the Remembrance, her own transformation beginning to show in the bioluminescent patterns that had appeared along her neural interface ports. Population holding steady at 812 volunteers, with more requesting transformation each week. Long-range sensors show no hegemony activity within 50 light-years. And the other threats? Voss's expression grew serious. Intelligence reports suggest that hegemony wasn't the only hostile species in this galaxy. We're detecting quantum signatures consistent with at least 3 other aggressive civilizations, all of them expanding toward human space. The entity nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility that came with transcendence. Earth's colonies would face new threats in the coming decades, enemies that normal human military forces couldn't comprehend, let alone defeat. But they wouldn't face them alone. The Forgotten Fleet was dead, but from its ashes had risen something far more dangerous: the Watchers in the Dark, humanity's monstrous children who had chosen to become nightmares so that their parent species could sleep safely. Through quantum dimensional sensors, she could perceive the approaching alien fleets, still years away, but inexorably closing on human space. Species that consumed stars for fuel, collective intelligences that turned entire worlds into processing centers for digital consciousness, predatory entities that existed partially outside normal spacetime. They would all learn the same lesson that hegemony had discovered in the wreckage of the Brood Heart. Humanity might be soft and fragile and short-lived, but when cornered, they became something that could reshape the fundamental laws of reality through sheer, bloody-minded refusal to die quietly. Sent a message to Earth Fleet Command. The entity instructed, her alien features showing something that might have been a smile. Tell them the outer systems are secure and will remain so. Tell them humanity's children are watching the dark between stars, and nothing will pass that threatens our species' future. She paused, accessing memories of a woman named BlackHFY who had once sworn an oath to protect humanity from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And tell them that the price of that protection is that they never ask what we've become. The message was sent, racing through quantum channels toward the inner systems where humans still believed in the comfortable lie that they were alone in a hostile universe. The truth was both more terrifying and more hopeful. They weren't alone, but they were protected by beings who had once been human and still remembered what humanity meant. In the depths of space, where the light of Earth's sun was just another distant star, the Watchers in the dark began their eternal vigil. They were no longer human, but they carried humanity's hope and fury into the cosmic night, ready to face whatever nightmares the galaxy might send against their fragile, precious, impossibly stubborn parent species. The forgotten fleet had died at the brood heart, but their sacrifice had given birth to something far more enduring, proof that, when humanity is pushed to the breaking point, it doesn't break, it transcends, becoming something the universe has never seen before and will never forget. And in the quantum foam between dimensions, the echo of Captain Cassion's final words continued to ripple through space-time, a message that would eventually reach every hostile intelligence in the galaxy. Remember that we were human when it mattered most. The universe would remember, and it would learn to fear that memory.